Shoplifting. I remember when there were no concealed cameras in stores to help shop owners reduce the risk and cost of shoplifting. I recall that stores were smaller and storekeepers were close by, which prevented shoplifters from having an opportunity to steal. Shoplifters are criminals. They intentionally take things from others. They are bad people. They are harmful to all of society. They set a bad example for others. They are retail thieves. Yes, I know. They are not like nor as bad as murderers, but still they have committed a crime, and so they are criminals. When they are caught, and they eventually will be caught, if they continue, they are arrested and first given a preliminary hearing before a magisterial judge. We must consider them innocent until they prove them guilty in court. At their hearing, these thieves probably will plead not guilty and go on later to court. But that isn't lying under oath. I'm going to do that sentence over. At their hearing, these thieves probably will plead not guilty and go on later to court. But isn't that lying under oath? They know they took the stuff and were arrested for it, but they are saying, I didn't do it. Why then aren't they charged with perjury after they are proven guilty? They lied under oath. Dan Connors. I remember when, through childhood and my teens, I lived half a block from Charles Corky Connors, whose house was on the corner of West Locust Street and West Fifth Avenue. Corky and his wife had two sons that I can remember. John, who became a postal worker in Clearfield, and Robert, who owned a restaurant in St. Mary's. I recall seeing two of Corky's grandsons from St. Mary's playing in his yard near my house. One of those boys was Dan Connors. Dan grew up to play excellent football, accepted a 4-year athletic scholarship to Miami University, and was then drafted to play for the Oakland Raiders. I was reminded of Dan Connors and the Raiders by the recent Progress article written by Tyler Colasar and his interview of John Kondo, the current long snapper for the Oakland Raiders. Dan Connors played for Oakland from 1964 to 1974, wearing his number 55 jersey as a middle linebacker on defense. During that time, he played 141 games, had 15 pass interceptions, 16 fumble recoveries, and 5 touchdowns. That's pretty good for a defensive player. I believe it is quite unusual to have two local area football stars play for the same professional team. Dan's brother, Tom Connors, was an announcer and DJ at WCPA before becoming general manager of WJAC-TV in Altoona. Dan Connors and the Raiders played against the Pittsburgh Steelers when the well-remembered Immaculate Reception play was recorded. He was on the field all game for every defensive play except for that one play. He watched the Immaculate Reception from the sidelines. Two young girls buy my dinner. I remember when, just this month, someone showed me how any of us can be kind, considerate, and loving to anyone else, even to a complete stranger. At 8 p.m., I finished my visit at the Du Bois Hospital and headed home. I decided to stop at Perkins to eat, where I ordered potato pancakes, one of my past wife Evelyn's favorite meals. After a while, the waitress brought my bill or tab, and I then leisurely finished eating my dinner. When I went to the cash register, the cashier said, "Your bill has been paid," and she handed me a note that read, "I hope you have a great night. XO, the girls in front of you," with a tiny heart at the end. Wow, that massively shocked me. Who are they? The cashier and the waitress didn't know. How can I thank them? Why did they do this? Who were they? What did I do that gave them thoughts about paying for my dinner? I'll never know. I do know this. They inspired me to pay more attention to other people in a restaurant and look for someone whom I think might accept a free meal and be as thrilled as I was by the generosity and thoughtfulness of some unknown human being. I'm hooked. I'm going to start giving like they did right now. Tim Winter's window. I remember when, just last month, I saw on Facebook a view of Tim Winter's 4-day temperature office, 4-day temporary office window, showing a great expanse of the ocean, the surf, a seamless cloudy sky, and the sandy beach with probably nice warm temperatures. What a view! With that said, I'd like Tim and you to look through my window pane to view a very much nicer setting. See the hills, the Susquehanna River with canoes floating by, some blue skies, the green lawns in the neighborhood, the pretty trees downtown, and our small patch of woodland with squirrels and rabbits romping about. Have a close-up look at the pretty spring daffodils and tulips. Visit the past at our historical society. You can be thrilled as a Little League hitter hits a home run at Kurtz Field. This is a part of Clearfield, a wonderful place to live. Go sit a spell at Chrisman's Elliott's Park, or watch boats being launched from the boat ramp at the Lower Whitmer Park. Look up at the huge clocks on the courthouse tower. Take a stroll on the new Riverwalk, where you can see the ducks and geese on our river. Interstate highway access is nearby. Go bowling for exercise. Watch the kids ride down the sliding board at one of our playgrounds. Share a stroll or jog along the driving park racetrack and notice the grandstand as you pass by. Take your family in lawn chairs to Weaver Street to witness the Firemen's Parade and stay for the fireworks display. Only Clearfield has all these assets. Drive up the Rocky Mountain while the laurel bushes are blooming in their brightest pink. Hear the Presbyterian Church chimes ringing out familiar hymns many times a day. Visit our Shaw Library to read books or use one of their computers. We have live theater at Cast or movies at the Ritz. Enjoy the brilliant autumn-colored trees after the first frost of October. Take a walk on the bridge to see some fish feeding along the river bottom as they swim upstream, or go fishing instead. Breathe in the wonderful smell of fresh-cut grass as the neighbor mows his lawn, or have a whiff of the yeasty aroma from the ethanol plant along Bigler Avenue. We have it all right here in Clearfield. After an evening rain shower, look for a rainbow over Cemetery Hill. Make sure to take a bike ride or hike along our rails to trails. Join the many hunters shopping at our fabulous sporting goods stores. Hear the locomotive whistle for a crossing as it pulls a coal train or a corn train along the tracks on West Side. You can go swimming at the community pool or the YMCA. Attend a court trial someday in the courthouse. Get a view of downtown Clearfield from high up on Clark Street. Then take a bus ride to see the parts of Clearfield you don't normally visit. Attend one of our many churches. In winter, get outdoors to watch the falling snowflakes create a magnificent white landscape. Oh, how beautiful. And yes, we have a Sheetz and a Walmart. Spend a day at the Clearfield County Fair to see the animals, farm exhibits, 4-H displays, the harness races, and grandstand entertainment. Enjoy the caring, happy, and helpful people of our town. I'm telling you about Clearfield, PA, a wonderful place to live your entire lifetime, just as I have done. When I consider all the great things about Clearfield, I am somewhat blinded when looking out Tim's window, because now what I see is nothing spectacular, just a vast volume of an undrinkable water. My first vacation. I remember when, during the Big Depression of the 1930s, my mother and dad allowed me to go on a vacation when I was about 8 years old. I was recently reminded of that great event when I saw 2 out-of-state children having a ball while vacationing with their relatives who are my neighbors. These 2 young kids, with helmets on their heads and smiles on their lips, were riding their bicycles on the relatively safe streets in our vicinity. They were having new experiences. At night, they slept in unfamiliar bedrooms and beds. By day, they saw unfamiliar faces, saw different sights, and heard new sounds. All this a part of growing up and gaining confidence in their young lives. And that's the way it was for me on my early childhood vacation, a wee bit scary. My Aunt Emily had accepted a position in Williamsport as a supervisor in a garment factory, and my Uncle Harvey was the house husband in their family. They had a son about 6 and a 3-year-old daughter. My first recollection of the trip occurred during the drive to Williamsport and happened just beyond Loch Haven, where the main highway crossed over an island. A real island, I ask. The name is Great Island, and it is formed by the Susquehanna River, dividing into 2 smaller streams that rejoin about a mile downstream. The island has over 325 acres of farmland and once had 3 Indian villages. It is similar to Grand Island, south of Niagara Falls, but smaller in size. Back in Clearfield, I could then boast, I've been on an island. In Williamsport, I slept on a strange bed in a different bedroom. All the neighbors were strangers. The houses and streets were unfamiliar, and even the Lycoming airplane engine plant made steady noises I was not accustomed to. A lot of reasons to become homesick, but I didn't. There were diversions to keep my mind busy. My cousin and I went several times to a city park on Lycoming Creek to swim on hot afternoons. It was a short walk over a low hill to get there. But the biggest deal about that vacation was riding my cousin's balloon tire scooter. They were new at that time and had a smooth, soft ride. I even rode it down Memorial Drive when there were only a few cars.
Unknown caller.
Now I forgot where I was.
Oh, let's see. Balloon tire in italics. Wrote it down a few cards.
Okay.
Thank you, Aunt Emily.
Yes. Thank you, Aunt Emily, for that great vacation. And thank you, Donald, for willingly sharing your scooter. And now, what do you remember about your first vacation away from home and mom and dad? Carpet beater. I remember when wall-to-wall carpeting first became popular and was in vogue. Prior to that time, most soft floor covering, called a rug, was delivered to your home in a roll and then spread out on the floor. They were mostly 8 by 10, 9 by 12, or maybe 12 by 15, depending on the size of the room. Most rugs had a design woven into the fabric in soft colors. They were almost never glued to the floor. If the rug became worn or threadbare at one end, it could always be reversed or turned 180 degrees, ready for wear on the good end of the rug. Anything dropped or spilled fell on the rug, so it was necessary to clean it occasionally. Most housewives didn't have electric sweepers, and they were not very powerful anyway. The best way to clean your rugs was to hang them over an outdoor clothesline in warm weather, strike them with a heavy wire handheld tool called a carpet beater. That made your arm tired, but it got the dirt out too. This then helps me recall some thoughts about a commercial carpet beater business once located on West Side during the entire early 1930s. It was located in a shed attached to the rear of Floyd Wilson's grocery store at the corner of West Market and West 2nd Streets. There was a garage-type door opening onto West 2nd Street to allow the dust to escape. The equipment inside was owned by Harold Hoffman, upholsterer, and consisted of a powered wooden drum or cylinder about 12 feet long and perhaps 18 inches in diameter. It had some 40 leather belts about 36 inches long, each one with one end nailed to the drum. When the power was on and the drum rotated, centrifugal force made the belts swing out from the drum. The carpet was hung over a long steel roller and could be pushed near the flailing belts so the dirt and dust could be knocked out of the fibers of the rug. That machine made a lot of noise and a lot of dust. That machine made a lot of noise and a lot of dust. I recall that pedestrians crossed over the street to avoid breathing in that heavy, thick dust. Quarantine signs. I remember when I had mumps. That's a childhood disease that kids usually caught or got during the winter months in first or second grade of school. But I wasn't yet old enough to go to school. Most everyone got some of the childhood diseases when I was a youngster, and that was before vaccines were created to eradicate them. My parents said I got the mumps from my older sister. They seemed happy that I wouldn't miss any school, as I would have if I had waited to catch the disease. Later, when I was going to school, I contracted the measles, whooping cough, and chickenpox. like most other children did. Another childhood sickness was rubella, commonly known as German measles. The most devastating diseases were scarlet fever, polio, and meningitis. I recall whenever someone in the family had a communicable disease, the borough health officer was notified, and he came and attached a quarantine sign to the outside wall adjacent to the front and back doors. Those signs were yellow with black lettering stating the name of the disease in large print and warning that someone inside had that disease. The quarantine signs had to remain in place for 2 or 3 weeks or until the health officer removed them. Most people stayed away from houses that were quarantined, but I don't know if it was mandatory. Isn't it great that scientists have all but eliminated most of these maladies? Our first radio. I remember when my parents bought our first radio even before Clearfield had a broadcast station. It needed a long wire for an antenna, and night reception of stations was considerably better than daylight reception. We listened mostly to KDKA in Pittsburgh and also a station in Chicago whose announcer at noon always said, "It's a beautiful day in Chicago," regardless of what the weather might be outside. KDKA, KQB in Pittsburgh, and KYW in Philadelphia are the only 3 broadcast stations in Pennsylvania whose call letters start with K. All of the other 400 or 500 stations in Pennsylvania have a W to start their call sign. A change in regulations in the 1920s said all new call signs east of the Mississippi shall start with W, and those in the west shall start with a K. All the radio stations in Canada have a C as the first letter of their call sign. By international agreement, each country around the world has a different beginning letter in its call sign. This system of unique first letters is also used in the aviation industry for identifying airports and also airplanes. Every airplane in the USA has a specific tail number beginning with an N, originally NC, and having up to 5 other letters and or numbers. That's the call sign used when communications with FAA controllers or other pilots. They don't want your name, just your tail number, such as N50434. In Canada, the identifiers start with C and have 4 more letters, but no numbers. Public airports in the USA use short 4-letter identifiers beginning with a K, such as KFIG for Clearfield Lawrence Airport, KBWI for Baltimore, or KUNV for State College. In practice, the K is rarely used, even on aviation charts, so we say BWI for Baltimore. In Canada, their C is always used, so Toronto Airport is called CYYZ. So much for letters and numbers. Cataract surgery. I remember when the Clearfield County Fair Board traveled to Reading to attend the State Fair Convention. While we were there, 4 of us took one evening to drive down to Philadelphia to visit a patient at the Eye and Ear Hospital. That patient was Carl Cochran, a former fire chief of the Clearfield Volunteer Fire Department. He was in charge of the volunteer workers who repaired and prepared the buildings and fairgrounds for the upcoming fair each year. Carl was blind in one eye, but was able to work full-time for the Clearfield Taxidermy, mounting trophy deer heads for proud deer hunters. As he aged, the lens of his eye became progressively clouded over by a condition called cataract. Surgical replacement of the lens had been recently developed, but was quite risky, so Carl's physicians had him wait for the operation until he was almost totally blind. So when we entered Carl's hospital room, we saw that the surgery was over. His head was sandbagged and the top of it was completely bandaged. His head was totally immovable. He recognized our voices and greatly appreciated our visit. After 3 more days and nights, the sandbags were removed, and Carl was pleased and relieved that his sight was restored and he could see once more again. Compare that experience with cataract surgery today. No hospital stay, no sandbags, no bleeding, almost instant vision again. I know because I've had both of my eyes done. Robert Wallace. I remember when Georgia School of Technology in Atlanta was a familiar place for me in 1944 and 1945. The name has been changed to Georgia Institute of Technology and is known worldwide simply as Georgia Tech. I was enrolled in the U.S. Navy Officer Training Program during part of World War II. It was a segregated, all-male engineering college, no blacks and no females. The students considered themselves to be tough and hardened men, as per their football fighting song. I'm a rambling wreck from Georgia Tech and a hell of an engineer. Conversely, students attending the nearby co-ed Emory University were considered sissies by the tech men. Hence, those teasing words often sung at Georgia Tech. Emory, M.O.R.E. We are the boys from M.O.R.E. We don't smoke, and we don't chew, and we don't go with girls who do. The history of Georgia Tech has been well documented in a book written by a Clearfield native, Robert Wallace, whose father worked at Clearfield Bank and Trust Company, attended Georgia Tech before I did. Robert Wallace, whose father worked at Clearfield Bank and Trust Company, attended Georgia Tech before I did, and then later was employed by the Public Relations Department of Georgia Tech. He spent 7 years writing his book called Dress Her in White and Gold. Those are the school colors of Georgia Tech. One of the items he relates in the book is about the most points ever scored in a college football game. Georgia Tech beat Chattanooga 222-0 back in 1912. Years ago, I purchased a copy of that book for the Clearfield Library. Railroad trains on 3rd Street. I remember when the Pennsylvania Railroad, later called Conrail, had railroad tracks right on 3rd Street in Clearfield. They were located in the southbound lane of automobile traffic, with just enough space for parking cars between the curb and the tracks. I can't remember many passenger trains, but daily freight trains were pulling empty hopper cars to coal loading sidings as far up as Grampian and hauling loaded coal cars on the return trip back to Clearfield. There were a few freight cars transported also. The train never exceeded 7 miles per hour in town. There were times when autos were parked out too far from the curb for the train to pass. The engineer stopped the train, blocking several crossings, while the brakeman went into the stores looking for the driver, always purported to be a woman. Each summer at fair time, the James E. Straits Carnival train arrived on those rails in the vicinity of Reed and Bridge Streets. After a long, tedious, and frustrating journey over several railroads from the Delaware State Fair. They were temporarily parked on 3rd Street while big tractors pulled off the wagons containing the rides and shows bound for the fairground across the river. The elephants were allowed to walk all the way. On Sunday morning, some parents took their kids to watch the train being reloaded for travel to the next Straits event. At a later time, because of increased automobile traffic, it was deemed necessary to install traffic lights at the intersection of Market and 3rd Streets. This was complicated by the existence of trains running on the railroad line. A train might enter the crossing while a Market Street light was green. This problem was solved by placing a switch on a pole several hundred feet away in both directions along 3rd Street. When a train approached Market Street, the brakeman would jump off the locomotive to flip the switch that stopped the sequencing of the traffic lights until the train passed the intersection. The need for the rail line diminished after most of the easily accessible commercial coal in the Curwensville-Grampian area had been mined and shipped. It was then that the rails were removed from 3rd Street. Capsule Sister. I remember when, as a young boy, I heard my mother talk about her Capsule Sister. Mother didn't tell me who this woman was, but I often wondered if she was for real my aunt also. Later on, I learned about this person. She was a member of Mother's Sunday school class, and this was a social function or custom among its members. Each year, the leaders of the class wrote members' names on small slips of paper and placed each slip inside a small plastic capsule. Each member then drew out a capsule and secretly learned the name of their capsule sister for the coming year. They all had access to information about the dates of birthdays, anniversaries, etc. of all the members. Everyone then sent greeting cards or perhaps small gifts throughout the next year for the special days of their capsule sister. After a year of guessing, they learned who had been sending to them, and then they drew new capsules for the coming year. Have you ever had a capsule sister? And no, she was not my capsule aunt. Shoe stores. I remember when there were many shoe stores in downtown Clearfield. Brown's Boot Shop, Heydrich Sugar Shoes, J.S. Robb Shoe Store, McClure's Boot Shop, and Bortoff Brothers. Probably Pennies and Lightsinger's also sold shoes. Most of those firms had similar store layouts, with the shoes stored mostly in boxes all along the outside walls, men's on one side and women's on the opposite side. Down the center of the store were two long rows of stationary wooden seats arranged back to back where shoe buyers could sit. The salesperson, almost always a male, placed a portable footstool in front of the seated customer. It was a footrest for the buyer and long enough for the salesperson to sit on while he fitted shoes on the customer's foot. He used a metal gauge to measure the length and width of the foot to determine the size needed. He then picked out 3 or 4 different shoes and tried them on the foot using a shoe horn. The customer then selected the pair that he or she liked best. Things are different today as the shoe business has become self-serve. Little Italy. I remember when the Harbison and Walker Refractories plant was producing millions of firebrick each year for the Pittsburgh steel mills. In the beginning, this company built its plant in Clearfield and became our largest employer because of the huge quantity of very high quality clay found in the nearby hills. However, Clearfield did not have enough workers to fully man the plant, so men were recruited from Italy. They came, built, or bought houses near the plant and raised their families in the area known as East End, or occasionally as Little Italy. They were kind and ethical people, but most never learned the English language. Their children were United States citizens from birth, and most of them became bilingual before starting school at age 6. In 7th grade of junior high, the kids from all 4 wards in the borough were brought together in classes, and so that was my first real contact with Italians. They tended to stick together, but they also enjoyed teasing us Americans in their second language. They would say things like pasta fagioli, which we thought were Italian swear words. We were shocked and amazed that they would say this aloud, but they just laughed among themselves. And that is how we became friends. SCUBA. I remember when I had my first swimming lessons at the YMCA when I was 6 years old. My grandparents had paid for my membership as a Christmas gift. Through my school years, I gained confidence in my swimming abilities and became comfortable even while paddling around half a mile from shore. In college, we were required to take a Navy swimming course called drowned proofing. There, step by step, we learned to stay afloat with ankles tied and our hands tied behind our back. Later in life, I saw an upcoming SCUBA diving instructional course planned at the YMCA. In scuba diving, you wear a full-face mask connected by tubing to an air tank strapped on your back. You needed a partner for this course, and each diver was responsible for the safety of his partner. A good idea. My partner was the son of my friend, attorney Davis Amberman, and his name is Frederick Amberman, Clearfield County judge. Fred and I spent hours underwater in the pool during the winter months, learning to use the equipment and caring for the safety of each other. Our final session was held outdoors in a deep body of water with many surprises over in Blair County. The water was icy cold, so we wore insulated bodysuits for warmth. The first surprise was discovering some coins underwater, just like in a treasure hunting dive. Down deeper, we discovered minecart tracks leading ahead. Following the tracks, we came to a school bus sitting upright, which somehow was inviting us to go inside to explore. When our breathing air pressure in our tanks became low, it was time to surface. For remembrance sake, my wife framed a penny for me that I had picked up during that dive. Oh yes, and SCUBA means self-contained underwater breathing apparatus. Automobile dealers. I remember when there were new car dealers all over the place. During my childhood times, most families did not have a car. We walked wherever we needed to go. To get a ride in someone's car was a pleasure and something special. It seems ironic that during the same time period, there were lots of automobile dealers in Clearfield ready and willing to sell you a car. Here is a list of some of the dealers I can recall, along with the brand of automobiles they sold. Routes and Schwartzel sold the Willys. Richard Latico Motors, Nash. E.J. Master, Chrysler Plymouth. Market Street Auto Sales, Packard. Bailey Motors, I don't remember the car. Bryan Motor Company, sold the Nash. M. Guy Stewart, Lincoln Mercury. Roan Motor Company, Pontiac. William Gillen sold a Studebaker. Stratton Motor Company sold Oldsmobile and Cadillac. Dots Motor Company, Ford, Mercury, and Lincoln. Dorse Albert, Chevrolet. Ross Buick sold the Buick car. C Classic Dodge sold Dodge Ram cars. Inks Motor Market, I don't know what car they don't remember. Smith Motor Sales sold the Hudson. City Auto Sales sold Dodge and Plymouth. Smith Brothers sold the Jeep and Rio. And Fred Deal Motors sold the Chevrolet. How many automobile dealers can you find in our local area today? I remember when my privacy started over. Peeping Toms. I remember when my privacy was invaded. My house is only 1 story high, which puts the bedrooms on the first floor with the windows about eye level from outside. The house is 200 feet from a quiet street, far enough away that drivers and pedestrians cannot see in the windows. We have privacy, I thought. Some 20 years ago, with my wife already in bed, I was undressing for bed when I thought I heard some giggly, muffled laughter outside our bedroom window. With only a bit of light shining out the window, I glimpsed the forms of half a dozen bodies madly running away. I grabbed my pants, put on my shoes, and backed my car out of the garage. When I arrived at the nearby bowling alley, there were 5 young ladies almost ready to enter. I recognized one of the girls and knew where she lived on Southwest 3rd Avenue. I told them that I saw them peeking in my window, and of course they all denied it. Then I said if they didn't admit it, I would make 2 phone calls, one to Southwest 3rd and another to the police. That sobered them up, and they said they were very, very sorry. I know these girls meant no harm. They were having a sleepover and had permission to go bowling. Somehow they went 2.5 blocks out of their way. I took their time and mine to lecture them and explain that peeping in windows is a crime, and doing so made them criminals, liable to arrest. They left with some food for thought, and their parents never learned of the event. My Swan Song. I remember when, recently, so many of you told me how much you appreciated the progress printing the 200 memories that I wrote for my grandchildren. You said that some of the short stories reminded you of similar recollections from your past. You also offered some corrections. I hope my stories made you smile as you reflected on some of the memories of your younger years. For me, it was a pleasing thing to record these memories in retirement. For my grandchildren, it will be a close-up look at the good old days from the words of their papa. Writing the memories was my pleasure, and I thank you for reading them. I will enjoy receiving feedback on what you thought of these recollected stories. End of message. Rodney H. Powers.
Email erhb4444@yahoo.com.